All right, we'll try this again. I'm sorry, everybody. I guess if I touch the microphone here, the plug is a little itchy. Once the audio cuts out, it doesn't cut back in, apparently so. So it's quite frustrating here. We were just talking on the stream. I'll let people come in here about the dizzying transformation of the culture that's happened in the last 5 or so years, and how we can kind of make sense of that. So if you're in the chat here, please let me know if you can hear me. Again, we were looking at the book. I'm introducing the book Energy in Orthodox Theology and Physics, from Controversy to Encounter. So I'll just wait to, okay, Corey, thank you. Thank you, Corey. It's like if I accidentally bump the mic in a certain way, once the audio cuts out, I can't get it to cut back in, and I can hear it in my end. So I kind of got to reset. So that kind of stinks here, because I think we were kind of get into a groove, and there's some of the chat that I missed as well. So I'm going to go back into reading from this section here, and maybe we'll veer off into different topics. This might be a little bit of a postmodern stream, right? Because we are not following kind of a single thread, and any topic that comes to mind. Corey, if you have something that we were talking about before that you're interested in continuing to explore, I think we were talking about the manifestation of this gender ideology that really has come into the fold since 2017, 2016. Kind of where did it come from, and how did it turn into this kind of seemingly social contagion? I went to university here in Florida, and everything. Have you seen Everything Everywhere All at Once? That sounds familiar. Is it a documentary? It sounds familiar, but I'm not familiar with it here off the top of my head. But I went to university and studied philosophy, and even postmodern philosophy in the early 2000s, and this was not present in the university, where it was in a very small kind of niche, and it was really since 2008. Um, yeah, I think I've heard of it, Corey. I'll have to check it out. It's really come into the fold since 2008. I think what's happened is the movement and the moving of the internet to the devices, to phones, and the proliferation of social media platforms, and combining these two things with algorithmic manipulation has really changed the landscape in terms of the discourse since 2008, 9, 10, 11 is when I think the Facebook was and Twitter was put onto the devices, the mobile devices. And we've seen the generation coming of age here, young, post millennials, who just live their life completely inundated by social media that's available everywhere, all at once on our phones. And how this has taken the subtlety of the coming of age, of coming into one's identity from pre-puberty through puberty into young adulthood, which is a fraught landscape in general. And to have that completely inundated by this social media technology has really transformed and changed things. And I think it's a and I think we're going it's a phase, but I think it will be transformed in one way or the other sooner than later, because I have young kids who are I won't have, from my perspective, them on social media until they are 18, in a sense. And even my 8, 9 year old, his friends have phones, and he has a tablet, but he doesn't have access to kind of unbridled access to the internet. And he has a watch phone, which he only has numbers that I can kind of program in there for us to communicate. But I won't let him have the capacity to get on social media just yet, because we've seen what's happening. And I'm not very conservative when it comes to these things, but it's just what's come to light. And I'm just going to do my best as a father to keep that out of their consciousness and out of their hands until they're more developed and can kind of handle it on their own. Let's see here. Thanks, Derek. Hey, thanks for popping on. Hope you have a good lunch. Thank you, man. See, Corey says story about all these different liminal exceptional lifestyles colonizing the normative. Yeah, I think that's right. And I think it's something like essentializing the exception, right? Where the movement to from inclusivity and from, well, I think rightfully so, not treating people that are on the fringes of kind of the normative, discourse as pariahs per se, or I think that the kind of liberal compassion towards different worldviews, I think that's what's been weaponized in the West, right? I think we're not seeing this. At least I'm not seeing it in other cultural contexts. In China, in different kind of orientations. I know it's there, but I think that it's really something unique to our Western culture, at least in its current form. So it's really fascinating and disconcerting to see it happen. See, Corey says there's a part of me that thinks some of what you're discussing is caused by the decrease in margin and excess resource available to people in the system. Yeah, I think you're right. It's hard to really pinpoint kind of the how this is happening. I really think it is rooted in an obvious innovation in technological and social media platforms, and I think it's the combination of the mobility of putting the internet and social media on our mobile devices, and then the proliferation of mobile devices into the hands of children, where they can kind of do whatever they want to do, outside of the protective, protective structure of the family. I think that's kind of part of it, but I don't think that's the whole story. I think when it really get into it, it's a deep kind of spiritual malaise, a spiritual vacuum that's being filled by all of these ideological forces that are capturing the minds and hearts of our young kids, and it's something it's really difficult, and it's even more difficult when you can't have conversations about it. So, yeah, for sure, there's definitely a Girardian aspect to it, 100%. I think his insights can give us a good lens into what's happening here, but it's hard to find the solution, because the solution, kind of Girard put forth is to not to get into these mimetic rivalries. Yeah, you really have to invest your desire in Christ, right? And it's hard. How do you scale that, right? How many people are reading Girard or familiar with Girard in the kind of natural social discourse? So how do you make, and this is something that I've been thinking about, how do you make these ideas palatable and more ready for a general population that can maybe curve this onslaught here? It really is quite a profound phenomena to observe and experience. But let me get into reading a little bit more here, because I think what sprung this conversation here, and again, I'm sorry for cutting out a few times here. So we're trying again. Book that I'm looking at here does Energy and Orthodox Theology and Physics from Controversy to Encounter. The chapter we're looking at is Chapter 8, The Language of Orthodox Theology and Quantum Mechanics, and it's putting the work of St. Gregory Palamas in dialogue with the quantum physicist Niels Bohr. He's kind of the father of quantum mechanics. So I'm sorry that we're going through this again, but I'm going to read the first chapter here, or the first paragraph here. So let's get started. It says the terminological, and I think this speaks to the concept in general, right? The terminological or linguistic aspects of Orthodox theology are highly relevant within the context of postmodernity, which is posing challenges to both the mission of the Orthodox Church today and her attitude towards scientific progress in general. So postmodernism is putting forth challenges to the Orthodox Church and its attitudes, and also to scientific progress. So these two kind of these tendencies on the kind of different spectrum of things are both being affected by this postmodern linguistic rearticulation and manipulation. Back to the text, he says, Christos Yanaris points out that one of the key characteristics of postmodernity is the emergence of a new language and dealing with ontology and reality, a language emerging from two different scientific disciplines, quantum mechanics and post-Freudian psychology. Christos Yanaris sees the postmodern duty of the church in the creative appropriation, and not simply the adoption, of this new language, aiming at linking the salvific message of the gospel to linguistic categories that could be more efficient in the interpretation of, quote, the reality of existence and the appearance and disclosure of being. and more specifically in the articulation of the experiential mode of the relationship between God, world, and man. According to Yanaris, such appropriation could become the source of a new proposal coming from the church to deal with postmodernity and not just to modernize herself. I'm not sure if I agree, says the author here, or how much exactly I agree with Yanaris. I would, however, agree with him that our present situation might be able to provide a greater advantage as compared to the age of the church fathers, who were very much proficient in the sciences of their own time, but still did not have the amazing access to scientific information that is openly accessible today and that could be found helpful for a better articulation of the distinction between what is real and unreal, between reality and its deceiving reflected image, quote unquote, the idol. And I think he's hitting right on here. And again, this was written in 2017, which was really the beginning of this this dizzying proliferation of something like gender ideology mixed with the social contagion propagated on social media. I think this was kind of the beginning of the kind of the Cambrian explosion of gender ideology. All right, back to the text here. According to others, the challenge of postmodernity is related to the apparent failure of the postmodern epistemological project to secure a secular basis for philosophy by transforming the metaphysical search for the ultimate ground of reality into a quest for its epistemic foundations. According to Scott Pentecost, it is exactly this failure that constitutes postmodernity. It resulted into a shift of focus from exploring and partaking of reality to an obsession with the methodological correctitude of the knowing process, thus detaching or emptying language from its inherent link to reality, and from its eventful ontological resourcing. Unfortunately, a very similar postmodern trend can be found also in everyday church life, where many of the words appear to have lost their authentic meaning and power. This is a danger with significant theological and ecclesial implications, since one can formally adopt the dogmatic articulation of the faith and even turn it into a linguistic idol, without really encountering or partaking in the sacramental events. According to Yanaris, this could not be called a real heresy, but it is a real tragedy. According to the late Father John Romanides, the detachment of spiritual life from the cognitive content of contemplative experience is exactly the point where belief turns into superstition and orthodoxy turns into a religion. Wow, that's a heck of a statement there. I'm going to read it again here. According to the late Father John Romanides, the detachment of spiritual life from the cognitive content of contemplative experience is exactly the point where belief turns into superstition and orthodoxy turns into a religion. Wow. Love to know what you think about that. Moving on here, the objective of this chapter is to provide an analytical framework that would enable the comparison of the ways of using words and language in the case of St. Gregory Palamas and Niels Bohr. The main motivation will be to explore Christos Yanaris' point about the opportunity of using quantum mechanics as a source of a new language that could be useful in enhancing the power of theological statements. It is important to point out that the main goal here is to use the insights from existing studies to provide a preliminary comparative analysis. The novelty in such an approach should be sought in the possibility of using the comparison to identify common linguistic themes, the distinction of which could become a source of insight for both theology and physics. On the one hand, such an approach could be methodologically beneficial for the ongoing science-theology dialogue. On the other hand, it could be highly relevant within the context of Christian homiletics and apologetics, and is precisely this aspect that is of greatest interest here. The discussion will necessarily focus on epistemological issues, touching on the nature of the relation between the meaning of words and the reality they represent. The focus on epistemological issues could be justified by the fact that both St. Gregory Palamas and Niels Bohr have been acknowledged for their epistemological insights. And again, thank you for tuning in. For those that are just popping on here, we're reading from and discussing some of the concepts in Dr. Stoyan Tanev's Energy in Orthodox Theology and Physics, From Controversy to Encounter. Zen Muppet says, thanks you for your work and effort. Always thought inducing. Thank you. Appreciate that. I appreciate you guys tuning in. So this section on St. Gregory Palamas, the controversy between Barlaam and the Calabrian and St. Gregory Palamas. Is the controversy between Barlaam the Calabrian and St. Gregory Palamas has become the subject of multiple recent studies. And there's a lot of footnotes in this. I'm not going to read through them here. The goal of this section is to emphasize one particular perspective, which focuses on some of the linguistic aspects of the debate. The key charge of Barlaam against the hesychasts was their claim about the vision of the divine light. He did not dispute the experience itself, but its interpretation. According to him, the interpretation could be based on one out of two possible options. The monks are speaking either about a sensible light or about the ousia of God. And since, according to Barlaam, the divine ousia is unknowable, there is one single option left. The light that light was seen by the monks and by the apostles on Mount Tabor is a sensible creaturely phenomenon. According to Barlaam, there can be no contemplation of the divine light per se, because the only light that can be contemplated by the intellect is related to the knowledge of creatures, or, quote, the knowledge expressed in words. And the knowledge possessed by the mind remains always associated with rational discourse, according to Barlaam here. This relationship between divine knowledge and about creatures, and the words expressing them was a point that became the subject of Palamas' critique or criticism. Quote, by my words, I stand against other words and not against the one who speaks. It is important to point out from the very beginning of the controversy, St. Gregory puts an emphasis on the discursive format of their discussion by asking Barlaam to put his thoughts in writing and by engaging into a written defense of hesychasts. As the controversy develops, St. Gregory makes it clear that the distinction between them is not a personal issue, and he does not oppose Barlaam himself, but his words. And it is precisely Barlaam's words, his written and defended opinions, that become the source of his concerns. I love this distinction here, right? St. Gregory points out that in his position, he is not arguing for himself, but has taken the burden to speak on behalf of his less illiterate fellow brother monks. Thus, in discussion moves into the context of the spiritual practices of the church. Quote, it ought to have sufficed to tell this man who fights about words and presents himself combatively that it is neither our custom nor that of God's church to be guided by idle words. According to St. Gregory, the Calabrian is satisfied with mere words and fails in seeking the truth of things, which is acquired through experience and manifested in deeds. Quote, we think that, he says, that true opinion is not the knowledge discovered through words and reasonings, but that which is demonstrated through both deeds and life, and which alone is not only true, but also certain and immutable. Barlaam's failure to go beyond words to reality underlies one of the key concerns of Palamas, quote, every word contests another. Words, once given a status independent of that which they signify, are subject to the will and to the specific context of their users. Quote, not only are the vices set alongside the virtues, but also impious words seem to be so near to pious ones that by a slight addition or subtraction, they easily transform into each other and change entirely the meaning of the words. Wow. In this way, for those unable to detect the slightest omission or addition, nearly every false opinion wears the mask of truth. Holy cow. Where's this quote from here? I think this is from Palamas. Let me see. That's a profound quote. Yeah, from the Triads. Wow. Let me read that again. Not only are the vices set alongside the virtues, but also impious words seem to be so near to pious ones that by a slight addition or subtraction, they easily transform into each other and change entirely the meaning of the words. In this way, for those unable to detect the slightest omission or addition, nearly every false opinion wears the mask of truth. All right. I think I got to do a deeper dive into this section, into this book on another video here, because I think there's a lot to add and to think about here. And again, I just picked up this book and I read the introduction myself and some of the preface, and now kind of moving along a little bit. So I'm going to do a kind of another video. I'll read this last paragraph here, and then I'll see about making another video kind of unrecorded live here. It makes it more difficult here. It says, Barlam, according to St. Gregory, hides himself in complication, conundrums, and ambiguities about the different meanings of words, seeking to mislead, quote, by his fair use of words. In contrast, we are not deceived, St. Gregory says, nor we deceive others by the sound of words, but entering into their inner meaning of words, we are guided by their truth of things. Things are not to be altered because of names, but the meaning of that which is thought should be changed or transposed according to things. For things are the cause of names, and not the names, and not names of things. For things are the cause of names, and not names of things. So very fascinating here. So I'm going to leave it here. Sorry for the technical difficulties. I'll see if I can pop on a little bit later. But I'd like to do a deep dive into this chapter before reading it. So I'll see if I can pop on a little bit later, or check out kind of a video that I'm going to be releasing later. So thanks for tuning in, guys. Sorry again for the technical difficulties. And again, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. And I will see you guys soon. Thank you. God bless.